Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you joining in our conversation about scaling organizational culture. We would love to know where you're joining in from. I know as of now, where people are still coming in. This is lunch hour, but still, as you join in, please share where you're joining in from. And this is a great place for networking as well. So please share your LinkedIn profiles, make these connections with like-minded folks. And at the same time, if possible, and you've got something that comes up as we speak, please share your comments and thoughts in chat. And we would love to even perhaps bring it up in our conversation today. So with that, my name is Gaurav. I'm the founder of easini, a boutique consulting firm, and we help mid to large size companies unlock their untapped potential with our improved employee engagement 90 days spark plan. Because guess what's missing in disengaged teams? That's the spark. Over to you, Earle.
Gaurav, thank you for that. Hey, everyone. To echo Gaurav's sentiments, thank you for being here. My name is Earle Hall. I'm the founder and CEO of Stone Age Consulting, where we believe in rock-solid solutions that stand the test of time when it comes to organizational development and HR strategy. I help companies become better places to work by improving how people and processes interact. My mission is simple. It's to help organizations become healthier, happier, and more productive without losing the human side of work. And if we can have a little fun along the way, even better. After all, culture doesn't have to be carved in stone, but it should definitely be built to last. So now that you know a bit about who we are, let's talk about why we're here, because scaling culture isn't just a buzzword, it's a strategic imperative. So why is it important to scale culture? Why does it matter so much? Well, for starters, it's essential for the success of the organization. And as we dive into the topic in just a bit, you'll hear some of the reasons why. Also, as organizations grow over time, the intentionality of tending to the culture of the organization can drop. Think of the organization as a rope. When it's new, it's tight and it's neat, but over time it can become frayed and lose that resilience, like an organization that strays away from its mission and its identity over time.
Well, so I want to add just one more thing is when we have these scaling cultures, when we are small, we're very intentional, but when the organizations grow, there are rituals that lose their meaning. Values become posters on the walls, and what once helped the organization to be successful gets lost in all the busy work if these critical components are not reinforced.
Exactly. And we know this is a huge topic with a lot to unpack, but time is limited, so we hope you'll at least take away a better understanding of three things from this conversation. Number one is what it means to scale culture. Number two is where leaders can sometimes get stuck in that process. And number three, one thing to prioritize when scaling culture. Now, this conversation is important because scaling culture isn't just about organizational growth. It's about organizational resilience. So we hope the insights that you gain today help you to build a culture in your own organizations that last as your organization continues to evolve. Now, already we've thrown out the words culture and scaling culture, and I just want to level set and make sure that we have the same understanding of what culture is. So I'm gonna take it from one of the masters, Edgar Schein, who's a foundational voice in the study of organizational development and organizational culture. He defines culture as a pattern of shared basic assumptions learned by a group as it solved its problems of external adaptation and internal integration, which has worked well enough to be considered valid and therefore to be taught to new members as the correct way to perceive, think, and feel in relation to those problems. So according to Schein, culture is really about those deep shared assumptions that shape how people in an organization think and act. That's the definition, but the real question is why not just acknowledging that culture exists, but why scaling culture matters so much in practice. Now, Gaurav, you've been looking into that side of things. So do you want to jump in and just explain why failing to scale culture can make or break an organization? And before you start, I just want to remind everyone that as we're speaking, do leave comments in the chat. Some of you will agree with what we're saying, some of you won't, some of you will have additional insights. So please do throw those comments in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that reminder as well. And thank you. Yes. So when I think about what we're really trying to answer over here is what it really means to scale culture in complexity. I want to cover a few topics before I dive into it. So number one is complexity. Look, complexity is all around us. We are complex adaptive agents. We group together to form organizations or groups that are complex adaptive systems. And then these become building blocks. So a group forms, or teams form into organizations form into economy, countries, and so on and so forth. The world is really complex. And it's always increasing. These complex adaptive systems and agents continue to interact with each other to create complex environments further. Basically, with complexity, we are acknowledging that things are changing constantly. It's the nature of the world. Environment is complex. These environments or these organizations are systemic. That means that they are interconnected. And finally, these organizations are non-linear. So it's not that we take an action and it forms or creates a result. It takes time. There is a delay. It's non-linear in its nature. It's not a straight line. Second thing that I want to touch upon is the fact that we need to understand that culture of an organization has both stable and dynamic components. Let's take an analogy of the body. In a body, we have bones and organs. These are the stable aspects. And then you have the changing, which is the cells and bodily functions. In organizations, these bones and organs can be thought of as your values and beliefs. And the dynamic aspects are your basic shared assumptions. We talked about the definition, the shared mental models of that group as it solves those problems. Those are the dynamic aspects of it. To think about the stable part, there is something that happens. In these stable aspects can, in extreme situations, break. So for example, M&A is a big example where two organizations come together, there's a change in organizational culture. Another aspect or example is the introduction of a turnaround leader. The leader may decide to break everything, break the culture, remove components that are not necessary for the new vision or the leader's vision, right? And create a totally new organization or a culture. Scaling culture in complexity means that you're allowing for those assumptions to evolve as the environment shifts around you, while staying true to the core values and beliefs that still serve the organization.
Yeah, absolutely, Gaurav. I just want to take a minute to acknowledge the fact that, hey, this is exciting. I mean, we got people from Georgia in the house. We got Canada, Toronto in the house. Hey, Satish, I see you. Um, Going back to what you were saying, Gaurav, I like your analogies there. I used to be a bio major, so I really love that analogy of the body as the organization. It's a great illustration of the complexity of organizations as they respond to those external influences from the environment, and it acknowledges the reality that change is a constant. The body adapts or changes just like organizations need to adapt. If they don't, systems break down over time and we can run into serious problems, right? When I think of what it means to scale culture, I think of the process of intentionally growing and adapting an organization's culture as it expands in size, geography, or complexity without losing the essence of what makes the organization effective or unique. I also think of the need to define and preserve core values. Who are we? What separates us from the other players in our space? Are we the innovative company? Are we the quirky company? Are we the risk-taking mavericks? Are we defined by our supportive culture or our collaborative culture? And lastly, I think of the need to embed culture in organizational systems. How do we take our values and keep them from being words in a handbook, or as Gaurav, as you said, just words on a poster on the wall, and actually integrate them into organizational systems and processes? For example, what does our onboarding process look like when we're introducing new members to the organization? how have we worked into that process that exposes new employees to who we are as a company in a meaningful way? What does our performance review process looks like? Is it this angst-filled session of berating, or is it more of a collaborative conversation centered around growth and development? And what about our leadership training? Do we even have leadership training? Do we require our leaders to go through training and other types of professional development so that they can lead effectively and be better managers? All of these things help to nudge culture along to scale naturally. Now, as I mentioned some of these things, I think about how leaders and organizations can sometimes get stuck at various inflection points, those points of opportunity for adaptation, where leaders can scale culture with some intentionality. So, Gaurav, what's been your experience with some of these situations where leaders can get stuck?
Well, before I jump in, I have to say that this is amazing. What you pointed out of the intentionality, the core values in the system, especially if you're talking about scaling culture, you're really looking at the onboarding, the hiring process in itself. That's your first touch point with the outside candidate and their ability to see what your organization culture is. At the same time, that's the point where you are deciding how you're going to scale your culture. That's the point where you can share what the organizational culture is and allows the new joinee to continue in the path towards your vision. Something that you mentioned also about the training, it reminded me of how when Satya Nadella came on, joined in, or rather became the CEO in Microsoft in 2014, some of the first few initiatives that they took was about training all their managers and leaders, because that's how you scale your culture. That is, they have to understand how to become a generative organization. So that was a pretty good call out over there. Now, speaking of leaders, when we think about where leaders are getting stuck, I think the trap is in trying to control culture rather than cultivating it like gardeners, right? They often make this mistake of replicating artifacts, rituals, perks, and surface level behaviors without really reinforcing or questioning the deeper assumptions that they represent. Leaders get stuck because they fail to make these invisible visible. They're not spending enough time surfacing the underlying assumptions that are guiding behavior. So we talked about the shared assumptions or the definition of organizational culture. That's the main part. You have to understand what your shared assumptions are before you start to scale, before you start to transform your organization. One thing is that they also assume that alignment is just one-time thing. Really, it's actually a recurring conversation. Without that, that's where the erosion starts. Think about the game telephone, right? The conversation starts with one idea, and at the end of the trail, there is totally different messaging, right? Finally, they're also overly relying on top-down declaration. We are still living in the past somehow. I don't know when we are going to change it, but there's a force towards it. So rather than engaging in humble inquiry, asking their teams, what are we doing that's actually working for us culturally, and why? Look, culture cannot be commanded. It must be discovered and co-created.
Absolutely. And it looks like Edwin also is agreeing with you as well in the chat. So people do keep commenting in the chat. I can recall being an HR manager trying to introduce a new process for documenting personnel changes like pay increases, job title changes, ad hoc bonus payments, etc. And there was all this back and forth with creating a letter and having multiple people sign the letter. Then a paper form needed to be completed. And then the information still needed to be entered into the payroll system. It was a whole thing that took days and had all these steps, not because the steps were necessary to accomplish the main objective, but because of the mentality around the process. And when I suggested a change, the initial response from the leaders involved in the process said those scaling culture killing words. Well, we've always done it this way. But these same leaders are delaying the process while they complain about how they don't have time in their day for meetings or to sign stuff, and they get everything late, or even worse, you get ghosted. They go non-responsive. So I suggested the change because I saw how the system was breaking down at different points because people became complacent with the status quo and stopped questioning is this process or practice that we did yesterday still helping or hurting what we need today and going forward? There's a book by Marshall Goldsmith called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Now, his focus is on leaders and how leaders need to be able to adapt in order to keep the organization moving forward during change. But the same concepts mentioned in his book can also be applied to the organization at large in terms of scaling culture and keeping the organization moving forward and adapting. Another thing where leaders can sometimes get stuck is just inconsistent leadership. And that could be inconsistent messaging from leaders, like one leader of the group saying, do this, while another is actively telling you to disregard the process and do this instead, because the process is, well, stupid. So if you take a step back before the inconsistent messaging, it sounds like a disconnect from reinforcing the core values that really matter to senior leadership, and those senior leaders holding their leadership teams accountable for making sure that everyone's on the same page and keeping their messaging consistent as they pass it down the line. Lastly, everything we do should all come down to the why. When leaders lose sight of the why, that core mission that binds everything together, that's where efforts to scale culture can go off course and get stuck. That why is the magic thing that keeps the rope tight. So it's important that we keep everyone walking that tightrope, so to speak. But here's the twist. Sometimes the very act of holding too tightly to centralized control in an effort to protect that mission can backfire. In fact, there are moments when decentralization isn't a risk to scaling culture, it's a necessity. It's what allows the mission to live and breathe across teams, geographies, and functions and departments. So, Gaurav, I know I've said a lot, so I know you have some powerful thoughts on that, so please share.
I think I want to, but Satish just added something. The strategies that brought you success so far may not be the ones that elevate you to the next level. That's absolutely right. And I think I messed up. I have still to upgrade my Zoom, so it's going to end our session in 8 minutes. So I'm going to keep this short. The response to decentralization, I think decentralization is very necessary. And in order for me to just bring about the point quickly, so to leave some point for question and answers, I want to draw on the analogy of the immune cells, right? They're not waiting for instructions from the brain. They're detecting patterns in their local environment. They're communicating locally with nearby cells through chemical signals, and they're acting autonomously, neutralizing threats, all without the centralized approval, right? So this principle is basically local action governed by global coherence, and it's the hallmark of complexity science. In that same situation, organizations need to teach their teams, departments, and frontline employees and trust them to sense the environment, act with autonomy, and align loosely to the strategic intent of the organization. So with that, I think, I know you wanted to add something, but I think there's one thing I wanted to share. I'll actually let you take it over on the last part on decentralization.
Yeah, well, I think of franchises, and one franchise that seems to do a pretty good job of scaling culture on some level is McDonald's. Now, if any of you know McDonald's, you know you could spot a McDonald's anywhere on the block by the Golden Arches. But enter Sedona, Arizona. Sedona changed the game. Now, a little useless trivia for those of you who care. Due to some of the zoning regulations in Sedona that are aimed at preserving that natural beauty of the area, McDonald's had to compromise and opt for a color that better complemented that natural landscape if they wanted to do business there. So now corporate could have been rigid and tried to keep everything too centralized and keep a tight grip on things. But they understood that not adapting to the needs locally would have meant missing out on a huge opportunity to capture a huge piece of that tourism market in Sedona. So the Golden Arches are actually turquoise in Sedona, Arizona, the only turquoise arches on the planet. And by allowing Sedona to adapt to meet the demands of that local environment, McDonald's was able to gain bragging rights to this quirky little landmark that travelers and fast foodies can enjoy at the only McDonald's with turquoise arches. So it's a great example of opportunity seized to create a win because the organization was open to relinquishing some control and adapting. Now, I know we've said a lot in a short period. We only have a few minutes. But people, please do keep leaving thoughts in the chat. I just want to ask one question. And I want to hear what you have to say about it, Gaurav. And that is, what is one thing that leaders can prioritize today in order to avoid a breakdown tomorrow? And I'll briefly state before you answer that for me, the one thing that leaders must prioritize is intentionality. Every action should be grounded in a clear outcome. Leaders can't afford to simply act or react to circumstances. They need to act with purpose and anticipate challenges and take steps today that prepare them for tomorrow. Intentionality also means clarity. Your message has to be crystal clear about what you and your organization stand for, even where you're headed. That clarity is really what keeps teams aligned and resilient and focused. We could all be familiar with the term mindfulness. Well, mindful decision making is about slowing down, resisting the urge to default to this is how we've always done it, and instead asking, given what we know today, right now, is this the right move for our long-term health? Intentional leaders, they don't just set goals, they intentionally build systems and habits that reinforce those goals every single day. So one more analogy, I consider myself a bit of an amateur gardener, so I compare it to gardening. A gardener waters, prunes, composts, and tends to a plant with intention, not to control every root, but to create the best conditions for growth. Without that pruning, the plant grows wild and it loses shape. It may not even survive. So the same is true for organizations. Without intentional care, that ambiguity can creep in and systems break down and the vision gets lost. So just like gardening, leadership requires trust as well. You can't control every external factor, but you can create the right environment for your people to thrive. With that consistent, intentional effort, you give your organization the best chance to adapt and stay healthy and grow into what you designed it to become.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Ajay agrees to exactly what you said. Staying transparent, educating, and show growth to the employees as the key to creating a great culture. With that said, I would add, I think I just want to add that intentionality is one core aspect. But we've got about 3 minutes, 40 seconds. So I think I'm going to keep my opinions to myself for now, but I open the room to the attendees. So hopefully, folks, if you have a question about scaling organizational culture, please, or if you just want to share something, some thoughts on this call today, please do so. I mean, get off mute, not all at once, but please do. And Carlos, thank you for joining back again. That's a great question. How do you help organizations quiet the noise? Want to share a little bit more, Ed?
Absolutely, and thank you both and everyone listening in. This is rich. Seriously, good way to level up during lunch in the background here for me. But yeah, so I think several of the examples you and Earl spoke to are sort of we're right on that very thin line between companies are not scaling their culture ideally because they either willfully, neglecting the needed, or sometimes they are focused on the quote unquote right thing, which is making sure the entity survives and hitting their objectives. And so what would help them is focusing more on culture, but they just kind of don't know that, just the noise of trying to make things happen on a given day, make them look away from, this thing that could help them. So, how do you guys sometimes, have to help organizations just quiet the noise so that they can then better focus on what would help?
I think I'll try to take this one, but purely from the perspective that I look at organizations so I've done OKRs, objectives, and key results. The idea basically is to quiet down the noise, is to ensure that there is clarity. There's a North Star that exists, and you're constantly talking about it, and you're looking at what your goals are, being crystal clear about who's going to do what and when. The idea is to reduce that busy work syndrome towards only focusing on things that actually move the needle for the organization. And I believe personally, OKRs is a great way to do that. That's a great framework that takes the mission, objectives, goals, and execution in a straight line.
Mhm. Yeah, I see. Ajay has also mentioned just setting up those expectations ahead of time.
Yeah.
And I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself from the comments in the chat as well as what you said, Gaurav. It all keeps tying back to the why, right? And just always asking that question of why. And even as you go through the exercise, when you find yourself getting off track, if you ask the question why and whatever answers are coming up don't tie back to that, why are we engaging in this exercise and why are we doing this? What are we trying to accomplish? You know you're starting to veer off a bit and it's time to maybe rein it back in a bit.
Yeah, awesome. I think we have less than 1 minute. We might get disconnected. My apologies. But thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
And please connect with us on LinkedIn and let's continue the conversation. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the day and a great weekend ahead. Thank you all.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Take care.